So for a time, I lived alone in a cute little garage apartment downtown. During a particularly rainy spell, the garage flooded and my apartment became infested with rats. Now, my landlord did what he could to get rid of them, but it went on for a few weeks, and it got so bad that you could hear them in the kitchen opening cabinets. The final straw for me was when one of them climbed into my bed and died on my pillow. Now, obviously, I left immediately, but what I couldn't leave behind was that fear. So fast forward a few years to the summer of 2017 in my junior year of college. I was invited to join the animal research lab as a research assistant. Now, I was an undergraduate student with dreams of going on to graduate school, so I knew this was a great opportunity for me. There's just one problem. The lab uses a breed of rats for learning and behavior studies, and I still had that fear sitting in me. Fortunately for me, my mentor knew my story, and she invited me to join and work at my own pace so that I could achieve my goals and get research experience. It was a decision that I had to make, and it was a hard choice to determine if I could work in the same area as rats. When I first started, I was so afraid of rats that I couldn't carry one of them in a cage. I would stand on the outside of the room with sweaty palms and a racing heart when another research assistant would transfer them in and out of the cages. I kept watching them, though, from my safe space on the outside looking in. The cages they're in are a plastic rectangle, and they have a metal grate top. In the lid is a small area where you can give food and water without having to touch the animal. It's a sturdy cage, though, so the first lesson I learned was that the rats couldn't escape. That meant that I could help transport them from room to room, and eventually I got to where I could help feed them as well. Then I began to see what they could do. Now, those guys are not much different than you or I in what motivates them. You just offer them a sweet treat. They will do just about anything you ask for a Cheerio or some Fruity Pebbles. Now, in general, as a species, rats learn incredibly fast. And much like children or puppies, you can see their personalities emerge. Now, some of those guys are high-strung, and they're going to require every ounce of your attention. Some of them are laid back. They just want to get the job done so they can enjoy a snack. Some of them work really, really fast. Some of them, honestly, they never get the job done. But I saw them and their individual differences. That's when I knew they had won me over. And from then on, I was no longer an outsider looking in. The surprising part about this experience was when I got bit. I understood then that something within me had truly changed towards them. Rizzo bit me twice on the same finger, just 5 days apart. And he bit me hard enough that my right middle finger will always carry the scars. I don't blame Rizzo for biting me, though. It was entirely my fault because of how I reached for him. So what if you walked up to a stranger in the grocery store and you placed your hand directly in their face? Now, the only way that Rizzo has to communicate with me is through his behavior. And unlike that stranger, Rizzo can't tell me to back off and give him space. The responsibility falls on me as his caretaker to understand what he is trying to tell me. Now, as humans, even the most nurturing and animal-loving of us think of ourselves as being pretty high on the evolutionary ladder. And in a lot of ways, we are. But one of the things I learned about working with rats is that our higher order thinking and consciousness puts a greater burden of caring for others on us. Now, the only way that Rizzo can communicate with me is through his behavior. Can you imagine what it would be like to not be able to communicate with the only other living species you interact with? Rizzo has no voice to speak to me with. He has no way to write me a message, and he has no sign language ability. The only way he can communicate with me is body language and behavioral cues. Now, how this translates to us as humans interacting with each other, that's the lesson that Rizzo and his brothers taught me. See, when humans interact with each other, we respond to events or situations from our own perspective. And that's why you often hear a phrase along the lines of, hurt people, hurt other people, as an explanation of why some people behave the way they do. That egocentrism is what is keeping us from communicating with each other, no matter what species we're talking about. The lesson for me was in acknowledging that Rizzo's experience, or Rizzo's awareness, comes from a different experience than mine. What I learned was that we could reach deeper within ourselves than our spoken or written language. Now, despite the bad press often associated with rats, Rizzo and his brothers don't bite first and then try to figure out what's going on around them. These guys respond when you give them the time to, after listening to what's going on in the lab, after looking around them to see what's going on, and after smelling their environment and the people that are handling them. Now, we too can slow down our reactions and look for the truth that is hidden between the words. Now, I'm not going to suggest that you start smelling the people that are around you, of course. And I'll even acknowledge that making sure that you use the right words for a situation is important. But what if we took it even further and took an extra step to listen and look for the truth that is hidden between the words? When I learned how to care for Rizzo and his brothers with empathy and compassion, I began to seek out their company. I learned how to listen to them. I learned how to really see them. I learned how to respond to them after getting a sense of what was going on in their environment. Instead of reacting from pain or fear, we as humans can also be receptive to each other. And I believe we can change our response set from fear to love the same way the rats changed me. Thank you.